Welcome everybody, and we will begin with the prayer, and Gina is going to lead us in a prayer that hopefully we're going to see here. Very good. Gina?
Sure, but before we begin our meeting, I would like us to pause to remember Father Dennis O'Brien, who was called to eternal rest earlier this week. He was a beloved priest with a brilliant mind and a compassionate heart, who served the Lord faithfully for 44 years in ordained ministry. He will be greatly missed. May God reward him richly. Let us pray. God, you created the world with your dream of what it could be. You dreamed of people and plants, animals and air, all living in right relationship to you and to each other. Today we offer to you our dream for a world which is not threatened by a changing climate which hurts our atmosphere, which wounds the poorest and most vulnerable, which leaves this wonderful planet in poor shape for future generations. Help us to listen to your voice, your word, and your creation. And this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Gina.
Amen.
So I will just briefly, for those who may be joining us for the first time, let you know that we are the Environmental Stewardship Ministry of the Diocese of Worcester. We've been operational since 2017 and have had very good support from the diocese and from Bishop McManus from the very beginning. We've run many programs through the years, starting in 2018 with a conference at Holy Cross where we had about 160 people. And we've had a series of other activities, including calendars for Lent and Advent, in a day of prayer. We had a prayerful walk in the woods. It was one of our COVID accommodations where families were encouraged to go and enjoy nature. And last fall, we had a green mass for the first time, and we are planning to have another one this fall, and hopefully Bishop McManus will be available. We'll have a little bit more about that later. As you can see in the mission statement, our focus is try to work with parishes and to drive and inspire action within the parishes, and not be in isolation or separated from that important work that the parishes are doing. Tonight's program is provided by Rise Engineering, is the House of Worship program of the Mass Save program. And I'm very pleased to have Jeff Mornell, if I pronounced it right. And,
yes.
And Jeff is going to talk to us about the program and then introduce our call to action, our follow-up activities that we have planned. So Jeff, I will stop sharing and allow you to start sharing and provide your presentation.
All right. Wrong one. Sorry. Yeah. Can you see that?
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. All right. So House of Worship program is a program. Well, before we get into that, I'll give you a little bit of information about Mass Day.
You want it in slideshow mode?
Sure.
The top center menu drop down.
And
you see in the center has view, review, slideshow, cider.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That's slideshow right next to,
So slideshow, perfect, okay. All right. Perfect. So this is Mass Save program. Basically, Mass Save and the utility companies sponsored an initiative to go ahead and provide savings in energy efficiency. They provide a wide range of services, incentives, information that's available through their website and through energy service providers like Rise Engineering to help assess areas where you could be more efficient and in turn take advantage of certain incentives that may be available to do that. So basically what they're trying to do is help customers manage their energy usage and all the related costs that go with that, okay? So Berkshire Gas, Cape Light Compact, Eversource, National Grid, Liberty, these are all the utility companies in Massachusetts that help sponsor this program and have put it together to provide the benefit of the rebates that are available to all their customers. Rise Engineering, we're an energy efficiency services provider. We're founded in 1977. We're located in Cranston, Rhode Island. We provide services nationwide, but we're based out of Cranston. So service Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York primarily. Back in 1977, the Rhode Island General Assembly was getting together, and the utility company wanted to work to provide services that would help consumers identify opportunities to reduce their energy usage. They would do this with an audit or with an assessment at either your residence. In general, when the program started, it was mostly residential. And then arrange for the installation of certain improvements and access to financing or other incentives, whether it be tax credits or rebates, to make these improvements affordable to everyone. Rise was one of the first companies out there in the US to do this. We've been at the forefront of this type of business for 40 plus years. So this is definitely an area that we excel at. We've been around a long time, and because of that, we've worked very closely with National Grid and the other utilities in the area. The House of Worship program has been developed under the Mass Save umbrella to provide services to churches, schools, parish halls, and all of these run through the small business direct install program. So what that means is it's a turnkey program where Rise Engineering has installers on staff, and we send people out to do the work if you decide to move forward with any of the proposed changes that we're offering. In going into a house of worship, we're looking at all areas for potential savings. Typical things that we find, especially when you're looking at a house of worship, typical opportunities will include lighting. Lighting is a very easy one. It's low-hanging fruit. A lot of the technology that is in the houses of worship that we visit tends to lean towards the older side and is ripe for an update. There is also a strong movement towards lighting controls. So that would mean things like occupancy sensors, photo cells on exterior lights, In the more complex areas of lighting control, it would be like daylight harvesting or trimming, high-end trimming on certain fixtures. When we go into a house of worship and we see a kitchen, we're also looking at things like aerators. We're looking for spray valves in kitchen sinks. If you're doing work, these areas help with not only the water usage, but also potentially gas usage, because you are heating the water typically to run through the pipes. Insulating, air sealing, these are areas that certainly, a lot of buildings in this part of the country are ripe for upgrades at this point. A lot of the duct work, if it's not covered in asbestos, it's probably not covered at all. And therefore, there's heat loss in moving the hot water through the building. Going ahead and wrapping those pipes can help provide additional energy savings. Thermostats, something we also look at. A lot of times there are just manual thermostats. Using a programmable thermostat in today's day and age helps with managing the overall usage in the building. Wi-Fi thermostats provide even greater control, but they get a little tricky because they do require a certain type of wiring. Oftentimes it's a common wire that's needed in order to use a Wi-Fi thermostat. Never mind that you do need a Wi-Fi signal in the building. We offer services for boiler reset controls, high efficiency heating units, as well as high efficiency water heating equipment. So that would be like on-demand water heaters, new boilers, things like this. There are rebates for some of those items. They don't necessarily run through the House of Worship program. When I was putting this together, I was speaking with Angela, my colleague, who was also with us. I like to refer to myself as a quarterback. There are a lot of programs that are out there, a lot of rebates that are available through Mass Save. And part of my job is to help you find those rebates and direct you to the right place. So, House of Worship program, these are some of the typical items that we do see and do often come out through one of our energy assessments. Parsonages and rectories, they are also eligible. They do not fall through the House of Worship program per se. They run through the residential program. But some of the services that are included, no cost LED lighting upgrades. So they'll come typically with LED light bulbs and leave them behind. They will provide advanced power strips. They can recommend and replace thermostats. They can put together proposals on air sealing and insulation. And certainly there are incentives for heat pumps and mini splits as well. So heat pumps and mini splits, again, the incentives are more prescriptive in nature and vary based on the size going back into a building. But just be aware that we can, in fact, send people out to go look at parsonages, rectories, even if they're residential. So why would you look at this program? The energy assessments don't cost you anything. So no cost energy assessment. When you pay your electric bill, you are paying into a fund which helps provide these services. So these services are readily available to you and offered by the utility company under Mass Save. We come out, we take an inventory of what you have there. We provide customized recommendations and solutions based on what we see. And we can oftentimes see incentives up to about 70% of the total equipment installation cost. That is driven entirely off of the reduction in usage. So depending on the savings that we can generate, that's what's going to help determine what that end incentive is. Further, if you decide to move forward, we provide flexible payment options. There's a 0% interest option where you can finance at either 12 or 24 months at 0% interest. This goes right on your bill and would be a single line item, which will be reflected based on whatever term that you choose to pursue. There is an additional lump sum payment option, which does provide even further incentive. You would get an additional 15% discount off of your copay, or your portion after the incentive provided by the utility company. So these programs then provide realized utility savings on your monthly bills, and not only in terms of kilowatt hours, but most importantly, in terms of dollars saved. What we want to do is help provide you the ability to become as efficient as possible, and in turn drive down your expenses. So the process itself is actually very simple. We have an 800 number, and there's also a website. You can go online and request somebody give you a call. Typically, that's going to be my esteemed colleague, Angela Pryor, who is on the line with us. She also will take these calls. We have gone ahead and set up a special code for the Worcester Diocese. So we would ask to help Angela and basically make her life a little bit easier, so she's not guessing as to whether or not you're a participant of this diocese. But we want to be able to track the opportunities that are coming in and see who's taking advantage of this program. So if you could kindly let her know that you are a member of the Diocese of Worcester, that would help her significantly. What she does at that point is opens up a request for an application, puts together a file for me, and I would reach out to then schedule the assessment. Typically, it's a week or so to go ahead and get that set up. If there are a number of assessments occurring at one time, I tried to lump them together in certain areas so I can make a day traveling to one area. But I promise I will get to you, so I do ask for your patience. When I get there, what I'll do is I'll ask what your main concerns are. And then I'll walk through the building and conduct an assessment, seeking any energy saving opportunities that I can find. So that may be weather stripping. We certainly will look for insulation. Lighting, as I mentioned, is low hanging fruit. So what we do is our best to provide you as much as we can in terms of becoming more efficient. So once I've conducted that assessment, I then return to the office and put together an energy savings report for you, identifying all of the needs for improvement. I make recommendations accordingly, and then work with the utility companies to get incentives and rebates on the project itself. So that energy savings plan that I provide will go ahead and show you what the estimated savings will look like. It will show you that in both kilowatt hours, which is usage, and dollars annually, so you can see what the potential savings actually means to your pocket. It will show you the total project cost, as well as the incentive from the utility company, and in turn what your copay would be, and then it would give you a breakdown of the different payment options that you do have available. It will show you also the simple payback on the project, and typically I will provide a return on investment number just so you have an idea as to what you're looking at when you're making this type of investment as to what to expect. Now, we've been to many churches, many different houses of worship throughout Massachusetts and Rhode Island. I have done projects in the Worcester Diocese area already. I did a project with Kevin at the Sacred Heart Church. And previously, a colleague of mine helped Pete with the St. Luke's Church. I would certainly welcome them to interject and share their experience here, or if you wanted to speak to them offline, you know, I'm sure they would be happy to discuss their experience as well. So to get started, it's very simple. Pick up the phone, give us a call. Again, the assessment doesn't cost you anything except a couple minutes of your time. Or you go online if you don't want to make that phone call, and you can simply go in and click through the questionnaire, and that will basically kick back to Angela, who will reach out to try and schedule a time, get your information, schedule a time for me to come out. Now, one thing that Pete and Kevin asked me to talk about when we first spoke, and because this is an environmental stewardship roundtable, they asked about community outreach and how houses of worship can help their parishioners, but also help encourage people to take advantage of programs like this. So obviously, as a pillar in the community, you're a valuable resource out there, and because of the influence that you have, you can help drive that participation and have people give us a call. We do have a residential program, obviously. There are rebates for all sorts of things. And I encourage people to go explore the Mass Save website to learn more about what is available out there. Because there's quite a bit, anywhere from simple rebates on things like dehumidifiers or air purifiers, to discounts on light bulbs, to full home assessments, to programs like this for the House of Worships. So clearly times are changing. You're seeing a lot more in terms of electric vehicles on the roads today. There's a lot more talk about solar energy and installing solar panels on roofs. These are both areas that we're getting into. We have a special team within RISE that can come out. They work very closely with the utility company. They can build and design solutions that could potentially meet your need, and basically also help you on the incentive side in putting that in. The incentives on especially EV charging stations are very good right now. Certainly it is a focus moving forward in this ever-changing world. Solar certainly is another area where we're starting to get our feet wet and trying to help customers produce their own energy. So again, we're RISE Engineering. My name's Jeff Morneau. I really appreciate you allowing me your time. Pete, I thank you for asking me to be involved in this roundtable discussion. Angela, if you're out there, I don't know if you want to pop in and say hello, but she will be helping me in taking care of all of you.
Hi, my name is Angela. I'm Jeff's colleague. I will be answering the phone when you call. And then just like he said, I will be getting the information from you, putting an application together, and then passing the information on to Jeff so that he can call you to schedule an assessment.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jeff and Angela. We do have case studies from St. Luke's and Sacred Heart that Kevin and I are going to walk through. But before we get into that, I wondered if anybody has specific questions of, I see Sue is putting a question in here. How does the House for Worship program differ from the small direct?
So this is a great question. I understand where she's going with it. So the Small Business Direct Install program does provide similar incentives, but on the House of Worship program, the utility company has really stepped up and thrown weight behind the program. That 70%, you see it a lot more often than you do in the small business program. So because the utility company recognizes that there's older technology in these buildings and there's room for improvement and savings, as I said, you're more likely to see that 70% incentive than you may be in the small business program.
Okay. Is there any awareness of the difference in the usage of a building? Certainly a sanctuary has a very different configuration and use than your average small business. Absolutely.
So we go in, and so I like to refer to it to every house of worship I go in, because each one is totally different and totally unique, and it provides its own set of unique challenges. So the sanctuary is oftentimes the configuration of the space. There are oftentimes big vaulted ceilings. The lighting that is used because of those vaulted ceilings are high power, high output. When we come in, we take everything into consideration and we do the best we can on everything that we have to offer. There aren't solutions for everything. We can't do everything, but we'll let you know. And certainly we'll try our best to address as much as we can.
And then a final question, if I may. Massachusetts Interfaith Power and Light has a program for houses of worship called the Environmental Stewardship Assessment. Are you familiar with that?
I am familiar with it. Typically, they have been kicking over their assessments to us.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I had a question. Oops.
Yes.
Just as a follow-up to that question about Mass Interfaith Light and whatever that was, sorry, I'm blanking out on the name.
Power and Light, yes.
Yes, but am I correct in thinking that they do not offer no-cost energy audits?
I believe you pay for their energy assessment. The one through this House of Worship program is free. Typically, when I've come across them, they've provided an assessment to House of Worship, and the House of Worship comes to me with that assessment and says, "What do you think?" And you know, we look it over. We go, we do our own assessment, and we try to help with as much as we can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Richard?
Yeah, Jeff, I had a question. On your presentation, you mentioned high efficiency heating systems for the church.
Yeah.
For the rectory, you mentioned the heat pumps and the split mini systems.
Yep.
Now, our church, like many, are all built the same way. We have a big volume of the interior that you have to condition, be it heat or cool.
Sure.
So I'm looking at the different options and saying all churches are probably the same. It'd be nice to have some sort of graduate student architecture look at them to see a better way of doing things. But I was wondering, how about the mini splits? Could you do high efficiency system for air conditioning using mini splits, maybe at the level of the pews where you're not using a lot of venting, let's say? It seems easier. Go on.
Also a great question. And I'm glad you sort of went there, because obviously when you're looking at the high efficiency heating systems, depending on what you have existing, how you heat the building in terms of steam, forced hot water, what the piping looks like. As I said, there are all sorts of unique challenges out there. In looking at those, chances are you're probably going to need a further study. You're certainly going to need somebody to design the replacement for the existing system. I have seen high efficiency heating units go into churches. Typically, you're looking at 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 units going in to condition that space. And, you know, when you're talking high efficiency, you're talking 90% or above in terms of the efficiency.
Right.
And the higher you go on the efficiency scale, the more expensive it gets. So sometimes the cost on that can be pretty high. Now, as I said, the incentives are there. There are incentives, but they're more prescriptive in nature, and they do look specifically at what's going back in. So where I wouldn't be giving you a proposal on that, I have resources available to me that can help with it. In terms of the mini splits, I am seeing mini splits used in the sanctuary of churches. Sort of along the walls, you may see multiple heads installed. Again, I think it depends on the space. It depends on how the building is built, and those are certainly considerations which need to be made. One of the nice things about the mini split systems that they are on demand, so you can turn them on, off, very close to when you're about to have a service, and have that additional control. I have certainly spoken with some priests who have told me that they have to turn the heat on in the dead of winter, a day before to heat the space, because the ceiling is 70 feet tall, and it's very hard to heat everything. I don't know, does that answer your question?
It answered one of them. I was going to ask you about solar energy later when you get time, or if you know anything about it.
And certainly I'll do my best. What's your question?
Well, and Peter and some of us have been talking about having some voltaic cells put on churches.
Yeah.
And one of the things we have to deal with is, let's say, the financing and how do you pay for it? So being a nonprofit, you're not able to take tax credits because you're a nonprofit and you don't have taxes to take the credits off of.
Right.
But there are other options that we were looking at, such as third-party installations. And you mentioned that Raj was beginning to look at that specifically for the worship houses. I didn't know if you went any further with that for incentives, or?
So oftentimes what I see actually is people applying for grant for installing solar on roofs of houses of worship. When you're applying for a grant, there is the requirement to have an energy assessment done in the building. That energy assessment has to be less than 2 years old. So that is certainly one step that's required as part of that process. We do have a team within RISE that does solar design, and they can help you with not only the design, but also with whatever incentives are out there with their expertise is. I mean, this is what they do. As I said, I'd play more of a quarterback position in some of these areas, because I'd love to be an expert in everything, but Not always
Understood.
possible.
Understand.
Understood. Understood.
Thank you.
So let me suggest that we queue up Kevin and myself talking about the cases at St. Luke's and Sacred Heart. And while I'm doing that, there was a question in the chat that I was going to kind of bring up anyway, but how often can you redo, because Sacred Heart and so St. Luke's did our assessment in 2018, I believe.
Mhm.
How often can a church we have a new assessment, a new audit?
General rule of thumb is that 2 years. However, I do think you need to consider what may or may not have been done at the time. If you didn't upgrade to LED at the time, probably area for improvement. You know, chances are 2 years ago, if we were in, we would have provided you with the best of what's available to try and help you with your efficiency. There's probably not going to be a whole lot more that we could do in that 2 year time to make you more efficient. However, if we looked at one area and you wanted to focus on that one area first and address something else later, so if we addressed lighting the first time out and you wanted us to come out and look at the heating or the insulation, you know, again, we can come out and certainly do that and then bring in whatever resources we need to further examine that.
Okay.
Jeff, real quick, Pete, real quick, if I may, is there any, with regards to the House of Worship program and scheduling an energy audit, is there any issue with being able to schedule the residential side, say for the rectory? In other words, if I scheduled you to come out today, does that prohibit me from contacting Mass Save for the residential program?
Not at all.
Or vice versa, for that matter?
That's a good question, and that doesn't prohibit you from calling to schedule that at all. In fact, Angela can probably speak to this better than I, but a lot of times when she receives calls, she is able to see all of the accounts, and in putting together the files, she's trying to match which accounts go with which building, and if there's an opportunity to address the residential side, she'll try to direct people that way as well. Great. So if we can try to deal with both things at the same time, we certainly try to do that.
So as Jeff just mentioned, if someone does call in and they give me the information, I will ask you guys to be specific on which building it's for, if it's a church or a parsonage. And then I can, at that point, email your information for the parsonages or living space buildings that you have. Instead of you guys calling, I can actually put an email together and send it over to residential and then have somebody give you a call to schedule an assessment. So it will be one less step that you would have to worry about. But I would have to have the information so I know which buildings are which. Because like as Jeff said, I can pull up the stuff on the computer, but it's not going to tell me specifically if it's for a rectory, a parsonage, if it's going to be for the church or a school. So I would need to know that. But then I could actually help you out as well to save you that extra step.
So I was actually, you're stealing my thunder a bit, because that's exactly what I did with Rise Engineering. I called, had all my utility bills, and you sorted it all out and says, okay, these buildings are in the residential side, the rectory, and the church and the parish center and on the commercial side. And you had both auditors come out. They came out different times, but within a couple of weeks. So it worked just as you described, very efficiently.
Good.
Thank you. We try to make it easy, so it's easier on you.
So I put together this little slide. It is a pretty easy process, and Rise is very good to work with in this. So you can call the main Mass Save number, and they'll pass it on to Rise and begin the request begin the audit process. At some point, I don't remember exactly whether I did it initially or on request by RISE, but I collected the utility bills and found that there were multiple. We had 5 different electric meters, it turned out, and so we needed to collect all of that. RISE performed the audit on site, generated the reports. I'm going to show you some samples of my reports, and Kevin has a similar set of reports. And then there's decisions to be made, and there's a contracting process, which is pretty straightforward and lightweight also. So in the St. Luke's case, we have 3 buildings, all kind of adjacent to each other, but they have different street addresses, and so anyway, we had to get all of that information pulled together. And as stated earlier, the rectory is under the residential program, and the church and the parish center are in the commercial. Turns out the heating plant for both the parish center and the church is in the basement of the church, and the hot water plumbing is connected underground between the buildings. So that affected some of the approach on how to do the audit. And with the within a few, it was about a month probably by the time the audits happened and the reports came back, we had documents that showed the rectory audit and financial proposal, which I'll show you in a minute. The church and parish center were combined, and we asked for product specifications on stuff that was in the parish center proposal. All of that was provided, and then there was paperwork to be signed. Because of the structure of the residential program and what we St. Luke's chose to do, it was 100% all rebated. So it really wasn't a contract. We just had to sign a statement that we received the services. And I believe that's so that RISE can submit their expenses into the Mass Save utility process to get their refunding. So that was very efficient. Let me show you what the rectory report looked like. It's a, are you seeing my screen? Are you seeing the assessment report?
Yes.
So it comes across like this, pretty simple to read. We had proposals for, whoops. Yeah, so we had a proposal that included the free LEDs that Jeff talked about, shower heads for the bathrooms, and an aerator on a hot water system. And again, all of this was 100% rebated. So the cost to us was zero. So all we had to do was sign off on this, and we received that. And that was for the rectory. That is the residential program report. The kind of the commercial report, again, it's the small business report, has a little bit different structure, a little more contract-like. The savings that we were identified in our church and parish center, which was a combined report, was all electricity. We had upgraded the heating system with a pretty high efficiency, variable speed drive motors and all that. So it was already pretty upgraded. Thermostats were all upgraded. So there was no gas saving. It was all electricity. The estimated energy saving in kilowatt hours is here, and the annual savings was $3,700 a year. The cost of the entire job was $13,600, with National Grid paying $9,300 of it. So the cost to St. Luke's was $4,300, inclusive of everything. And so it was about a 14-month payback if we paid the lump sum payment. And there's the 14-month on the report. There are these options that Jeff talked about of interest-free 12 and 24-month payments. The advantage of that is if you're saving $3,700 a year, you can, and you pay it out over 24 months, your payments that are on bill, as Jeff said, are compensated by the lower utility cost in the bill. The bill, the quote was fully itemized on every area, every site, what type of lighting was changed, and how much power is expected to be saved. One of the challenging things in this step of the process was you can get the kilowatts that are used by the light, but you have to estimate how many hours a year that light is normally on. So for each room, each circumstance, I had to go through and come up with how many hours a year do I think it's going to be on? And it's basically a guess. Nobody keeps track of that. And so if you guess too high, you're overestimating your savings. And if you guess too low, it's the opposite. But when you're getting 14-month payback, even if I was too high by a factor of 2, it would be a 24-month payback, which is still pretty attractive. So those are the reports. The kind of the main audit reports. The contract again for the parish was a couple pages. We had product specs for every light that we had installed. There were questions from the finance committee in regard to warranty and so forth. So I got answers to all that. 10-year warranty on most of the lights, which is well beyond the payback period. So it was satisfactory. So in summary, the support from RISE was great. The staff was knowledgeable and responsive. We used email and phones and so forth. People got back to me very quickly. There were a couple of areas that I wanted changed that I wasn't able to get it through the program. We have a big hot water heater, which I'm sure it has a lot of standby losses. Our rectory was designed to support up to 5 priests living in the house. And of course, there's nowhere near that in these days. And at the time, there was no Mass Save or RISE program identified that was suitable to replace that or to put in a more efficient solution. And in the church, Jeff somewhat alluded to it. We have all these high energy halogen lights, 1,000-watt light bulbs, 14 of them down the nave of the church, and a bunch of other 200 to 500-watt halogens. And the report came back that there were no LEDs available. I'm not sure it's whether we need to get an architect in or how we address that, but it seemed like the main energy use on lighting within the church persisted, and we didn't kind of address that. We addressed a lot of other lights that are also on, outdoor lights in particular, that are on for long hours. And the entire parish center was overhauled with all LEDs. The other comment I'd make is, through the experience, is the parish needs a representative that needs to be working with RISE continuously. It's more than your office staff, your secretary in your office or the priest. And he needs to have some understanding of what the technology, what the systems are about, so that they can help the parish make good decisions. So there is a little bit of a a volunteer side on advocating for the church and making sure that it all works. Not that RISE is difficult to work with. It's just, I think it's important that somebody represents the church in the process. So those were my comments. And Kevin, I think you had some comments on Sacred Heart.
Yeah, thanks. So, we have the similar setup, as you can see, the little Google Earth of Sacred Heart and Hopedale with Parish Center and the church falling under the small business HAL program, and the rectory falling underneath the residential program. If you want to go next slide. So we opted at the time not to have the rectory reviewed for whatever reason. I actually was not the lead agent at the time for our as our parish representative, and certainly something that we'll be looking at doing in the near future. However, Jeff, actually, as he mentioned earlier, was able to visit us in the height of COVID, if memory serves me correctly, and worked with our parish representative to put together both the church and parish center audit and proposal. It also included the product specifications, as Pete alluded to, and then the church and parish center contract. We didn't want to show you guys the exact same documents because they literally are the exact same documents on the church and parish center side, but I will comment that the total expense of the project at Sacred Heart was $16,000 and change. $12,800 was covered by National Grid, and Sacred Heart had to pay $3,200. I believe, Jeff, maybe you can comment, maybe it's not necessary, but we might have gotten a little bit of a better incentive based on the timing in which we did it as it related to COVID. Our initial quote came back at around the 70 mark, and I think we hemmed and hawed a little bit on our own, and Jeff sweetened the pot a little bit based on COVID. We pulled the trigger at that point in time.
You got the Kevin discount.
I'm not suggesting that we have COVID in any way, shape, or form come back around again so you can get the extra 10%, but maybe a wink and a smile might do you some good. I don't know. What do you say, Jeff?
I'll see what I can do.
It's all in kidding, all in kidding. So, breaking it down, if we were to go the 12-month route, it would have been $267 a month. If we were going a 24-month, it would have been $133.62. And our return on our investment was 29 months. So a little over 2 years. I don't recall off of the top of my head which route we ended up going, but obviously, the savings are necessary. And we overhauled pretty much the entire parish center. As I mentioned, we didn't touch the rectory. That's a future project pending. And I learned just recently, and Jeff, maybe you can correct me if you recall this project, we didn't do much in the way of the actual nave or the church building itself. We did the hallways, the bathrooms, the sacristy, any of the other rooms, but at our direction, unfortunately, it seems that we did not allow any work to be done in the actual church space itself. And I think that kind of harkens back to Pete's comment about making sure that the lead agent is somebody that can really be there, be engaged, and speak to, the greater good of these programs, because I can tell you right now, we have halogen floods that are pointing at stainless, or rather stained glass, that basically just illuminates out towards the street. And I'm sure there would have been a better option in that choir loft for that stained glass, had we allowed Jeff to do what he was there to do. So in summary, a very easy process. My lead agent, I spoke with him yesterday. He indicated that working with you, Jeff, was a pleasure. So tip of the hat.
Thank you.
The rectory and the parish house were not audited at the time of the church and the parish center, falls under the residential program and is currently pending. We did learn that Sacred Heart utilizes a propane system or a propane fueling system as opposed to gas. And at the time, Mass Save and Rise did not have a suitable program to replace our older programmable thermostats. We did inquire on utilizing Wi-Fi thermostats, but the common wire comment was made by Jeff, as well as the fact that we didn't have an active gas account with the utility, we felt that that was not something that we needed to do at that point in time. Again, something to revisit at a later point in time. I did want to make a comment about some of the language that is within RISE's contract, Mass Save's contract, dependent upon how you look at it. There were some fixtures that we had in our parish center that were old. We were under the impression, I think initially, and again, some of this is very much to the parish representative and their communication with Jeff and or RISE. But it was my understanding that the fixtures were old. We were under the impression they would be replaced completely. And instead of that, the ballast were replaced. And as a result, we had the same fixtures, and those fixtures were without covers. Jeff, ringing a bell at all?
Absolutely. In fact, very familiar with this. So obviously with any of these projects, when you get into some of the installation, you're going to encounter things that you don't see during the course of an audit. In the particular case of the parish hall, you had a special wiring in place, which was like an alternate switch. So basically you had 8-foot fixtures set up with 2 sets of 4-foot lamps, and one switch controlled one side of each fixture and another switch controlled the other side. So, you know, when I asked for the lights to go on, the lights were turned on, and I assumed, based on the lights, all the lights going on simultaneously, and in my experience with the lighting, an 8-foot fixture would just have one switch controlling all of the lights. I did actually make a recommendation for a new fixture. I believe, as I spoke with Bill, it didn't fit quite in the space because of the sort of the design of the room. The angles didn't allow for the lens to actually like work within that footprint. So, I mean, this is actually a very, very good point that you bring up. I mean, there are times when things come up. We try to address them in the moment as best we can. There is language in that if we can come up with a suitable replacement, and in your case, it was relamping and reballasting. So we took the older fixtures, which included putting in a new electronic driver or ballast, and then using LED tubes. Now, the LED tubes themselves, technically they are not, they're plastic and they're not really breakable. I know Bill wanted new covers on the older fixtures, and unfortunately covers for fixtures are something that's very hard to match up, especially if you're going back, what, 20 years or whatever it was that they were originally installed.
So the kind of the fundamental message here is this idea that there needs to be ongoing communication between RISE and the church, and there's always going to be issues which come up on projects, and this is a good example of it, and it needs to get sorted out. And hopefully good communication keeps everybody on the same page as those issues come up.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the reason why I wanted to highlight this is because there is that unknown factor, and we are dealing with, generally speaking, older technology. Jeff, I think you mentioned it, older wiring. And, you know, the decision that was made to light half of the fixture on one switch and half of the fixture on the other switch, it's a little archaic. So, you know, I think that those things happen and you just got to work through them. we don't have any ill will towards you, Jeff. It's okay. I think quite frankly, when we might have been trying to get the cake and eat it too, and we got the cake and the cake was just fine. So moving on, we did not seemingly have any addressing of insulation or our furnace or boiler. That's something that we will be revisiting soon. And then obviously the work was completed during the COVID-19 closures. As far as my understanding, the work with Jeff was not hindered in any way. There was the removal of the equipment once the work was done that did have some delays to it. It was understandable the space wasn't being used, but everything all in all worked out really well. And we're very pleased with the results.
I'd like to pause at this time and again, see if there's any questions that haven't been addressed. And then I had one other comment, but anybody else have any questions or comments they want to make on the thing I was going to say, and I mentioned this to Jeff in our pre-meeting, is that I follow what's going on at the state level. And there is a new 3-year plan coming out for Mass Save starting in 2022. And it's a great debate at the State House. Every 3 years there's a new plan, and there's a new one coming. And the new one is going to be much more greenhouse gas and climate focused than just energy savings focused. And so there'll be new programs, including fuel switching, to get people to switch to heat pumps. And frankly, I think there's going to be reduced incentives on natural gas, no incentives on any of the propane or oil, and all of the money is going to be put into heat pump investments for heating systems. Not all of the money. In this phase, that won't be all. But anyway, the program hasn't been announced, but the program is under change, and I would expect there to be much sweeter incentives for heat pumps in the next 3 years. And so that'll be something, as we find out, we'll pass that along to everybody. I think that is all my notes.
Well, Jeff, we're putting Band-Aids on our boiler until it comes to fruition, and then we're calling you.
That's fine. I do remember looking at your boiler and was told we're not looking at this right now. If I may, you mentioned insulation earlier, and obviously it's a great point. Everybody's asking for insulation because many of the buildings in this area are under insulated. Insulation is one of those things that is tough because we have to look at the design of the building. And I remember in my presentation, I did mention that incentives are driven off of the savings that we can generate. So when you're looking at a house of worship, you're not always going to have the usage in the building that you need to get the high savings and in turn the high incentive for things like insulation. Now, rectories, obviously, a different story. The incentives for insulation on the residential side are actually quite strong, but they're different. And it's a result of the primary focus of the utility company when you're looking at the two different, the business side versus the residential side. And it's simply how the program breaks down. Incentives right now on the residential side can be as high as 75% on the installation piece that you're putting in. So while we may not be able to address it in a church with 70-foot ceilings and stone walls, we may be able to make up to you on the other side, looking at the rectory, which is more of a traditional house-like building.
Sure.
and you know, that in turn goes with the heating systems and mini splits and things like that. The programs are separate. They are different. They have different parameters. So that's certainly something to be aware of.
Yeah, I'll tell you one example, which is, I think, almost funny. The basement of the rectory at St. Luke's is a conference room. It's basically just a meeting room, and there's office staff for music director and so forth. So it's an office space, but because it's in the rectory building, it's called residential. The exact same fixtures in the basement of the rectory, there was no LED replacement in the fluorescent tubes in the basement of the rectory because it was residential, where we did about 50 or 60 of the exact same fixture in the parish center and replaced all of the tubes with LEDs and new ballasts, just because they were on different programs.
Yeah.
The residential program had higher incentive, 100% incentive on everything we did, but it didn't have this fluorescent tube replacement option, which was kind of the cornerstone of what we did in the commercial side.
Yeah, I wish we could be all things to everybody, and it's just not necessarily how it works. As I mentioned to you, I try to play quarterback in an instance of might be better served going through the residential side on the rectory for things like incentive, even if you have like office space on the first floor or something like that. It's if I'm sort of pushing you that way, it's because it's in your best interest.
Yeah. No, I mean, we were happy with the results.
Good.
The other little note I had here, which I was looking for, was besides insulation, the windows of churches, the stained glass and the little crank closing windows are notoriously leaky. And it's unfortunate, but there really isn't a good, triple glazed window or storm window or some way of reducing the air leakage. I'm sure the infiltration around the stained glass windows is very high.
Absolutely it is. And the stained glass presents a whole nother level. I have seen people put plexiglass over the stained glass and totally destroy the window. The heat beats down on that plexiglass. Sometimes you get condensation, which builds between them. It just wreaks havoc on them. I wish there was a good way to not only protect the window, but to insulate it. And unfortunately, that's just not the case.
Yeah, I've researched and I'm to the same conclusion. There really isn't a good answer. So thank you, Rise and Jeff and Angela, for joining us. You're welcome to stay for the balance of our meeting. We're just going to do a little bit of a wrap up of some of our programs this summer and into the fall. But thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and support. And again, you're welcome to stay as we continue our meeting.
So Pete, I'll let you get to your meeting. I did see one question pop up there about Catholic schools. We can run Catholic schools through the House of Worship program, and we do. We have done schools, and because of the House of Worship program and because of the higher hours of usage that you see in these schools, the incentives can be very strong. And when we're going in and doing replacements, a lot of times we're looking at new fixtures as opposed to simply relamping and reballasting, because with those incentives, it makes sense to go with the new fixture. Does that answer your question, Gina?
It does. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. So we'll be calling Angela.
Thank you for noticing that. I missed Gina's comment. Anybody else have a comment? I don't want to miss anybody else. Tax credits are not available for House of Worship. What about SRECs? I can answer that. SRECs are available. in the financial incentives for solar are available to churches. The financial incentives in Massachusetts no longer include SRECs. There's a program called SMART, where there's a discounted tariff for solar produced energy, and there's you get higher incentives for low income if you're building on a landfill. So there's all these formulas, but it's a tariff-based structure, and they no longer have SRECs in Massachusetts. And Jeff, if you had anything further you wanted to add.
I don't. I think you hit it.
Tax credits require a financial structure where you get a tax-paying entity to pay for and own it through a tax period, and then sell it back to the church. And you can set up a hybrid ownership structure where a tax-paying entity owns it for like 8 years, gets the tax credit, and then sells it to the church, and it's all built into a single contract. So there are people who will design that type of contract for you if you're interested. And I could recommend one person at least, and I'm sure there's others. And Jeff, thank you again, and Angela, really appreciate your support. And I think Rise does a great job, and it's, like you said, every building, every house of worship is different, and there's always surprises, but you were good to work with, and we work through every issue.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Thanks for having us on. We really appreciate it, and we hope to hear from some of you in terms of setting up some assessments. It'd be great to get out and sort of see how we can help.
Yep.
Yes,
So
thank you very much.
We will be broadcasting this back to all the priests in the diocese. Will get an email from me with a link to this presentation. So we'll see how much in the parish staff. I have an email of all the priests and all the parish offices. So we'll try to continue to promote this. And again, Angela, thank you for kind of having a reporting system. I think that would be helpful for us, because we struggle to understand how much impact we're having. And so having an organized way of understanding our impact is very helpful.
Absolutely.
So I am going to pop up a couple more slides and then get us on our way. Let's see if we can do this. Okay, so our update. So again, this is our second roundtable meeting. I think I see a chat.
I'm just saying goodbye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, bye-bye. I just thought of something when Louise was leaving. The SMART program doesn't apply to municipal lighting plants, so it wouldn't apply to Shrewsbury or any other Diocese of Worcester area town that has a municipal lighting plant. It applies to the investor-owned utilities, National Grid and Eversource. But there are other programs available with Selco, which I don't understand. The update from the Diocese of Worcester is so we had our meeting in May, and we focused on development of parish-based environmental stewardship teams. And we do really think that this is kind of foundational to our work, getting an active liaison in every parish, and if possible to have a team of people supporting. And wondered if anybody had any feedback on the meeting in May and any progress they may have made in that interim period. And if there's any feedback you have for us on forming environmental stewardship teams. I don't hear anybody and see anybody, so I'll take that as there's no feedback. I do see Barbara on there. Barbara's on my team at St. Luke's, and we've been very active and continue to make progress on our pollinator garden. And appreciate, and we have had an opportunity to have some new visibility within the parish because of that. So again, it's a journey. There's no one action that's going to cause the meter to totally shift. I think the Mass Save type programs, I think gardens, recycling programs. I know St. Mary's has done recycling and composting, I think has been discussed. So I think there's programs that we need to look at implementing. Second thing I wanted to bring up was, and I actually told Kevin he was going to talk to that first bullet. I just stepped on you there, Kevin. Did you have anything you wanted to say about environmental stewardship teams?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I wanted to add is that while it's nice to have a team, we still have to get some of these things done in our parishes. So even if you're a team of one to start, baby steps, make those pushes in the right direction, work with your parish council or your priest and, make sure that we can get an energy audit with RISE. It's so simple to do. It just takes picking up the phone and making that call. And I think that traction will continue to be gained as you start to make these presses in the right direction, these movements in the right direction. But you got to start somewhere, and your team might follow based on seeing some of the achievements that are in fact made within the parish based on the work of one. It's got to start somewhere, and baby steps are acceptable. But we got to get the ball rolling on some of these activities, whether it's a pollinator garden or calling for a mass save or a recycle program. There's so many different opportunities out there, but you got to start somewhere. So that would be my only comment, Pete. Thanks. Gina,
Yeah.
Did you have a question? You raised your hand. You're on mute.
Sorry. Thanks. I had two comments, I guess. One, that it might be useful for parishes to put a little blurb in their parish bulletins about Mass Save, and a blurb that encourages parishioners from the point of view of residential usage to contact Mass Save if they haven't already done so, to make use of the savings. So many times I think people are not aware. So putting it in the bulletin would help in terms of readership and people becoming aware. And the second thing I wanted to say was, since the last round table, it's interesting how when we keep our eyes and ears open, opportunities crop up. So we at St. Mary's, our parish does not have space which has enough sunlight for a parish garden, but a school in our town contacted us to say that they have land and they have raised beds and they would like to rent out the beds if anyone wants to have a CSA type plot of land, a small bed. So we opted to do that. We paid the amount that they had asked for rent, and we've got the raised bed. We're growing vegetables, and it's being donated to a pantry that takes fresh produce for those who come there. So that was great, because we worked in partnership with small parochial school. They're a Muslim school in Shrewsbury, and it's brought about good conversation, good relationship, good exposure on both sides. And we've been happily tending our vegetables, more or less happily, given the rain. So thanks.
Thank you, Gina. One thing to follow up on that, one of I did the Mass Save audit very early in forming an environmental stewardship team at St. Luke's, and one of the side benefits was it had to go up to our parish council and get reviewed, and that then immediately generated a very wide visibility to the fact that we have an environmental stewardship team. and created a very constructive dialogue about what's the purpose and the mission of the team. So that's another plug for why Mass Save Audit, because it goes right to the staff of the parish, however it's run, the priest and the parish staff. There was a major conference on Laudato Si at Creighton University over the last few weeks, and a couple interesting things have come of it. One is the Vatican has a new platform for environmental climate response, and there is now a U.S. presence for that platform. This has been coming for about a year. I think I've mentioned it in some of the email distributions. I'll show you on the next page, and I'll provide a follow-up information on where that platform is. It is something, it's something that I think will flesh out a bit over the next year. But the first kind of visible deliverable of a website and some tools from the Catholic Climate Covenant have come out, and I'm going to show you on the next slide. The conference was attended by about 2,600 people nationally, and we actually got some good visibility. The Diocese of Worcester was mentioned as one of the exemplary dioceses nationally because of the activities we've been driving over the last few years. So credit to all of us. In the fall, our kind of main focus, or our current focus, is in the season of creation. You may be aware that between September 1st and October 4th, which is been set up ecumenically worldwide as the season of creation, to celebrate and to focus on protection of the environment and God's creation that we share. We held a Green Mass last year, and we are in the planning stages of another Green Mass this year. More information will be forthcoming. We do believe that the bishop is going to be conducting and celebrating the Mass with us. Again, the details have to be worked out, but we're excited about that opportunity, and expect it to happen in the Green Mass to happen either in September or the first half of October, depending on the bishop's schedule. Kevin, any other update ideas? Oh, I guess let me do my slides here. So the new website in the Vatican platform, the U.S. website is called We Are All God's Planet, and it's kind of a play on word of God's plan and God's planet. The Vatican platform is designed around 7 initiatives: one for families, one for parishes and dioceses, educational institutions, including K through 12 schools and so forth, hospitals, other organizations, businesses, as well as religious orders. Germane to our work, there's some new tools that are coming out, and I've shown one on the side here. They're packed full of tools and suggestions and links in regard to how to form a environmental stewardship team. They call them creation care teams. It's the same idea. And you know, everybody's struggling with the same challenges. It's how to get volunteers to spend time from their busy lives, and how do you, you know, what are the barriers you're going to face, and how do you overcome them and keep moving down the road and keep making progress, as Kevin had suggested. So it's more information will be distributed through email and flock notes, as well as the social media outlets. Just a little plug for our communications efforts. We are on Facebook and Instagram. We have an email account. We'd appreciate hearing from anybody if there's questions or concerns or suggestions. We're constantly trying to evolve and learn from all of you how we can best serve the parishes in the Diocese of Worcester. Anybody from the diocesan team or any other questions from any of the parishes?
No, I just have a comment on the Creighton University, one that they talked about, that there's 7 areas. And if you notice that the parishes are second and families are first. And while I understand why we focus on the parishes, I think we need to also kind of look at the families and kind of work that in. And I know some of the places that do have, gardens, they were able to talk to some of the families and get them to work, a week at the garden and that kind of thing. But that may not be, feasible in all, to work in the garden, all the time. But I think we need to look at different activities that we can focus getting the families together, whether it's just something simple, but the idea is getting them together and working them as a unit. And I think we need, and then the other thing that they had mentioned about, I don't remember the whole details, but they were talking about training like 8 people. And then when that was done, then they would train the next 8. And I just thought of the Gospels, and they didn't mention 8, but they mentioned 12. But, in other words, we need to keep working, in groups. And I guess that's what I was getting to with the families. That's another grouping. And I think in that way you can enlarge the number of people that you're involving, and it's a unit. And so I think that's something we need to look at.
There's a good insight and comments. I think the essence of a parish is a collection of families, or individuals at least, in most cases families. So I think we certainly need to understand the best ways to work with families and encourage ourselves as a diocesan team, as well as the parish teams, to be working with families and encouraging them and understand what it means to engage with the family unit. So I think that's a very good
And that kind of dovetails with Gina's suggestion of putting it in the bulletin about mass save. I think if people as a family can get some savings, then they're more apt to spread the news, so to speak, and be more involved in trying to help the parishes to save money as well.
Yeah, I agree. And on Gina's comment, I think we could go into the diocesan dispatch, which, if you're familiar with that, it's one place where we could write up an article and push it to all of the parishes through the diocesan dispatch, and then the office managers can just pick that up and put it into their bulletins. So I think it's a good thought. I made a note of that also.
I think it's, I think our presentation this evening is also Catholic Free Press worthy. I think that there's a story that could be generated that could also disseminate the information to the larger group. The dispatch is definitely a good one. We need to be in those parish bulletins. Gail and Gina, I think that those are paramount comments. But, looking at that large scale, the bulletin is a good one. So is Catholic Free Press.
I agree.
Other comments? Well, I think we have reached the end of our program, and I appreciate everybody's attendance and participation. I hope it met your expectations, and I was pleased with the discussion. So thank you all.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Pete and Kevin, and good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.